Man, let me tell you something right now. Women's boxing is in a place nobody thought it would ever get to. And that's what makes this so fascinating. Because what we're seeing isn't just fights, it's history unfolding in real time. And when you've got names like Claressa Shields and Savannah Marshall stepping into the spotlight, it's not just about who wins or loses anymore. It's about legacy. It's about rivalries. It's about culture shifting right in front of our eyes. And honestly, it's one of the wildest evolutions in combat sports because these aren't just athletes. They're trailblazers. They're carrying the weight of an entire movement. And when you understand the pressure, the stakes, the spotlight, you realize this isn't just boxing. This is something bigger, something you can't look away from. And that's exactly why we're diving into this story today. What's wild is how these fights ripple outside of just boxing, man, because you're talking about cultural shifts that go way beyond the ring. Like when Claressa Shields calls herself the greatest woman of all time, people outside of sports hear that they debate it, they argue about it. It sparks conversations about gender, about recognition, about respect, and that bleeds into pop culture in ways you don't always expect. And the fact that you've got these women headlining arenas, drawing international crowds, and being treated like legitimate stars, that changes the perception for young girls watching at home. That changes how sponsors look at the sport. That changes the opportunities for the next generation because it normalizes the idea that women belong in the spotlight of combat sports, not on the undercard, not as a novelty, but as the main event. And that cultural impact is huge, because combat sports have always been a reflection of society. And right now, society is saying, we want to see this, we value this, we respect this. And that kind of acceptance only comes when the athletes force it into existence through undeniable performances. And that's what's happening. Shields, Marshall, Taylor, Serrano, they're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for the narrative of women in sports. And that's why these bouts feel bigger than belts. They feel like cultural moments, almost like milestones on the timeline of equality. And that's something you can't buy or fake. It's real. Man, if you pay attention to the way these fights are being promoted now, it's insane compared to 10 years ago, because back then women's boxing barely got airtime. Now you've got documentaries, primetime interviews, podcasts, social media campaigns, hyping it up. And it shows you how important the media machine is in making a fight feel larger than life. And this is where guys like us, commentators, podcasters, networks, we all play a role in shaping how the audience sees it. Because when you've got Claressa talking smack on ESPN, Marshall responding in pressers, the networks pushing highlight reels, suddenly it's everywhere. And the casual fan who wasn't paying attention before is now fully locked in. And that's where you see the spotlight truly making stars. Because the performance in the ring is only half the job. The other half is making sure the world knows about it. And that's what's happening right now. The narrative is being fed and amplified by the media in a way that feels like a storm. And once that storm hits, it doesn't just create viewers for one night, it creates fans for the long haul, and that's the power of spotlight in combat sports. Man, if you really step back and think about it, women's boxing is one of the craziest transformations we've seen in combat sports history, because for the longest time, it wasn't even part of the conversation. Promoters didn't want to touch it. Networks didn't see any value in it, and the mainstream just brushed it off as this novelty thing, like, oh yeah, women can fight, but who's going to watch that? And now, fast forward to where we are, you've got Claressa Shields walking into arenas like she's carrying the entire sport on her back, Katie Taylor selling out Madison Square Garden in a headliner fight that outdrew some of the men's cards, and Savannah Marshall bringing that raw, intimidating vibe that just electrifies a crowd. And it's like, dude, this isn't a sideshow anymore. This is the show. And what blows my mind is how quickly it flipped. Because once the skill level caught up and the conditioning, the training, the strategy, all the stuff people used to say was missing, suddenly everyone realized, oh shit, these women are legit athletes putting on legit wars. And that's the legacy shift we're witnessing in real time. It's not just about belts and titles, it's about rewriting the history books of an entire sport. Because 20 years from now, when people look back at this era, they're not going to say that was when women started boxing. They're going to say that was when women took over the narrative of combat sports. And it's fascinating because it's not just fans who are changing their perception. It's the fighters themselves. You can hear it in their confidence and their walkouts and the way they talk at press conferences. They know they're carrying something bigger than just themselves. And that's a different kind of pressure, but also a different kind of motivation because they're not only chasing championships, they're chasing legitimacy, they're chasing respect, they're chasing a spot in the culture that can't be denied anymore. And to me, that's legacy, man. When you create something so undeniable that the next generation doesn't even question it, they just accept it as fact. And right now, women's boxing is doing that, live in front of our eyes, and that's insane to think about. You know what really makes combat sports tick, man? It's rivalries. Rivalries are like gasoline on a fire. They're the thing that takes a great fighter and puts them into superstar territory because it's not just about who's more skilled anymore. It's about storylines. It's about personalities colliding. It's about fans choosing sides and getting emotionally invested. And that's why Claressa Shields and Savannah Marshall hit so differently because you've got Claressa, who's this unapologetic, loud, confident champion who calls herself the greatest and backs it up with skills. And then you've got Marshall, this stone-faced, cold, calculated puncher who carries that aura of, I'm going to break you every time she steps into the ring. And when you put those two archetypes against each other, you're not just selling a fight. You're selling a narrative people can't look away from. And that's the magic of it, man, because even casuals who don't watch boxing regularly suddenly care when it's two people who genuinely don't like each other, who've got history, who've been jawing at each other for years because it feels real, it feels raw. And when they finally clash, it's almost like the entire sport rallies around it. And the crazy thing is, these rivalries aren't manufactured. They're born out of competitive spirit and pride, which makes it so much more intense. And that's why the Shields versus Marshall thing resonates. It's Ali versus Frazier energy. It's that tension you can feel through the TV. And people love that because it reminds us what combat sports are supposed to be. Two warriors testing each other with the world watching. And that's always going to sell. Here's the thing, man. The future looks insane for women's boxing because we're at that tipping point where it's not just about the current stars anymore. It's about the infrastructure being built for the next wave. And you can already see it. Young girls are joining gyms, not just because they want to box, but because they want to be like Claressa, like Katie, like Amanda Serrano. And that's when you know a sport is healthy, when it's inspiring the next generation. And when promoters see how much money these fights can draw, you know, they're going to start investing more, building better matchups, pushing rivalries earlier. And all that compounds into momentum that makes the sport impossible to ignore. And I think in 5 to 10 years, you're going to see parity, where women's cards are drawing just as much attention as the men's because the athletes are that good and the fans are that engaged, and it all started with this current wave proving the world wrong. So the future of women's boxing isn't just bright, it's unstoppable, and we're just at the beginning of that ride. So here's the deal, man. What we're watching with Shields, with Marshall, with women's boxing in general is nothing short of revolutionary. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of shift where the sport goes from being doubted to being undeniable. And fights like this are the reason people are starting to realize how real and how brutal and how beautiful this whole thing can be. And that's why I keep saying pay attention, because 10 years from now, when people look back, they're going to point to this exact era as the one that changed everything. And whether you're a hardcore fight fan or just somebody tuning in because of the hype, you're witnessing something special, and that's rare in sports. So buckle up, enjoy the ride, and stay tuned for what's coming next because it's only getting bigger from here. Good luck to both warriors stepping in that ring, and thank you guys for being part of this wild journey.